you. My name's Jen Ackland. I'm with Queensland Conservation Council. We have put tonight together as a session on lessons in regional campaigns, and the example is beating mountain bikes in Redwood Park. Before we dive in, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we all live and work on. I am coming in from Jagera and Turrbal lands, but I want to pay respect to the elders from all of the lands on which we walk and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. If you want to put your lands in the chat, please feel free to. We'd welcome you to. So we have an hour together tonight. The idea behind tonight is to experiment around how QCC member groups and other conservation groups that might have joined us tonight can better work together and support each other to win on the kinds of environmental fights and climate fights that you're fighting. Like how can QCC help groups collaborate better? So my role is as organising coordinator. I've been with QCC for a year now, and given the scarce resources we have, one of the things we're trying to do is work out what can we as QCC do. We can't get involved in every local fight, but what can we do to try to either amplify or provide that kind of scaffolding for groups to do all of the hard work that you're doing. So tonight is it's a lessons night. It's about you being able to engage in discussion about what can we learn from this example and from each other's examples, because knowledge is in the room here. It's certainly not with me. I first heard about this story of Redwood Park when Maggie and I were doing a regional trip out in the Darling Downs and regions around there to talk to people about climate transition. And I was just struck by the energy that was in this campaign and the energy of the people that had fought it, and how often we don't get a clear victory in our campaigns. And so to have a dig into when we do, what some of the elements are and what some of the challenges are as well. So that's the purpose of the evening. I will think I've introduced myself. We have three speakers tonight from the Save Redwood Park group. We have Hugh, I hope I said this right, Hugh Krensky. Yes. Hugh is the coordinator of the Park Care group of Redwood Park, who has been in that role for, I think, around 15 years. They bring together volunteers to work in that park regularly, and has been a big part of coordinating this campaign around the mountain bikes. We have Sandy Brown, who is DDEC, Darling Downs Environment Council committee member, and also part of the Save Redwood Park team. And we also have Deb Ford, who is with the Toowoomba Field Naturalists, and she is also she's a representative on the Redwood Park steering committee. They'll talk about that in a minute. The way we propose to run through tonight is a bit of a presentation from the group, but to keep that really short. Yep. So that you can have time to mull over what your questions are about it. And my role, I've asked permission, when you see me being very bossy and moving things along, I've asked the group permission to do that so that we can hand it over to you as participants, because the night is about learning from one another. Do a question and answer, put people in breakout sessions of 3, maybe 4 people, to have a conversation about relating it to your campaign, and then come back to the lessons learned. Before I hand over to introductions, are there any questions about that? So I'm going to start from the top and on my screen. And what I'm going to ask is that if I'm going to start with Kim, and if you can say your name and the group that you're from, or who you're representing, and then pass on to somebody else in this call that you haven't seen yet. Awesome, that's great. Okay, Kim, over to you.
All right, hi, I'm Kim. I'm a volunteer with Queensland Conservation Council as part of the member support team. I'm here just to help run from behind the scenes. So I'd like to pass to Hugh, I guess, to start. This is the next on my screen.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about why Redwood Park was such an important thing. Can we move to that screen at all?
So Hugh, before we jump to that, you're just saying who you are and you're passing it to someone else,
okay.
And then I'm going to hand back to you.
Okay, sorry. Hugh Krensky. I'm the coordinator of the Park Care Group in Redwood Park. We've worked there for about 15 years or more, and we work there at least twice a week. I'm also on the committee to stop the mountain bikes coming into Redwood Park. And
that's great. Thank you, Hugh. Who are you going to pass on to?
Oh, Sandy.
Hi, my name is Sandy Brown. I'm on the Darling Downs Environment Council Committee. And I was also on the Redwood Committee, and I'm also in the Dancing Bear Cafe Society Incorporated's Committee, which I'm secretary of, and that managed all the funds from the Redwood fundraising was managed for the Dancing Bear, which is an incorporated non-profit organisation.
Thanks, Sandy. Who are you handing over to?
Deb. It's you, Deb.
Hello. I don't seem to be there, but never mind. I thought I clicked the right
You're here. We got you.
Okay. I am the conservation officer for the Toowoomba Field Naturalist Club, a club that has spent many hours in Redwood Park. And as a result, we were concerned about the potential damage. And so I joined the steering committee of Redwood Park, Save Redwood Park team.
Thank you. Do you want to hand to Mick?
Are you there, Mick? I'll hand over to you.
Yep. Mick Adzini. I'm president of the Toowoomba Bird Observers Club. Been involved since '79, and it was just a no-brainer that the club be involved in this campaign, and I became part of the Save Redwood committee as well.
Thanks, Mick. Who are you handing to?
Hand over to Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Jeremy. I'm in Brisbane, we're in New South Wales at the moment. I'm part of Mount Cootha Protection Alliance, and we're looking to try to keep expansion of mountain bikes out of Mount Cootha. So I'll hand over to Charles and the team who are in Brisbane.
Hello, I'm Charles Warringham. I'm on the committee of the Mount Cootha Protection Alliance and the Hut Environment and Community Association in Chapel Hill, which is where we're meeting. And we have half a dozen of us here from both groups, very keen to learn more about your experience with this kind of issue, because we have the Mount Cootha draft concept plan for mountain biking just recently published here.
Right.
Let's go to, I can see Patricia on my screen, please.
Patricia.
Mute. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, just getting used to this. I'm in Mackay. I was the former coordinator for Mackay Conservation Group a few years ago.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. We have a proposed bikeway the council's pushing really hard without putting out much information. And I sent in a fairly large submission. They wanted to put about 40 bike tracks.
Thank you.
Right next to the national park.
I'm just going to, awesome.
That's right.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to keep it moving, but thank you very much. Welcome. To Ingrid. And then we'll go Crystal after Ingrid.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'll just...
Oh, good. Just who you are, where you're from.
I'm up at Mission Beach. I'm in Juru country and I predominantly work on cassowaries.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Hi everyone, I'm Crystal. I'm in Gorrambil Borough Council. I am the coordinator for North Queensland Conservation Council, and I was born and did all my schooling in Toowoomba, so very familiar with Redwood Park.
Thanks, Crystal. Let's go Erin and John and then Simone. Let's go Simone while Erin and John are trying to get off mute.
Hi, I'm Simone. I'm the Conservation Manager for National Parks Association of Queensland. Sorry if you hear that noise behind me. My partner is downstairs playing the electric guitar, but I'm based in Brisbane. I'm actually out Ipswich region, so not far from Toowoomba, so I have an interest in this as well.
Thanks, Simone. Don't worry, I've blocked my kids out of the room. I'll go to John Brannick, and Erin and John, if you're there, jump in too.
Yeah, John Brannick. I'm very interested in these sorts of issues generally from Brisbane.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And it really doesn't matter if you're not, but it's curious, is there a particular group that you're connected to?
Well, I'm connected to Theka in the hut.
Great,
and I couldn't get there tonight, but I'm also interested in motorbikes in national parks and things like that too. Thank
you so much. And Erin and John, whenever you want to jump in, please jump in and introduce yourself. Is there anyone I've missed? So I'm going to jump to the first, the next slide. And Hugh, you jump on, give us your 3-minute intro and tell us when you want us to start the video as the 2-minute clip as well.
Okay, well, it might be best to start the video clip now, actually.
So this is Redwood, our much-loved park on the edge of the Toowoomba Range. It's actually a very rare and threatened ecosystem. An Australian dry rainforest. These rainforests were once widespread throughout southeast Queensland. They now just exist as fragmented patches, providing refuge for species, some endangered, that would otherwise have nowhere to live. Redwood is a small, rare, fragile forest, much cherished by Toowoomba, and now facing an imminent threat.
I've lost sound. Has everyone else lost it?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, it's finished, I think, the sound.
The best is to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's threatened ecosystem for the generations that follow us. It's a wonderful habitat. It's got numerous threatened species, and it's worth saving.
So Hugh.
Okay, do you want me to speak now?
Please, Hugh, you go.
Okay, did you manage to get my map in there at all?
I think it's
there we are.
now.
Good. I can speak to this. Okay, this is showing you basically Jubilee Park, in which the current mountain bike trails are. That's shown by the yellow, and the proposed tracks are shown by the red in Redwood Park. You can see where the endangered dry rainforest is. It's marked in green. The mountain bike tracks are going to go through the ecotone. And just a comment on the ecotone, when we have our wildlife cameras out there, we pick up about 3 times more species in the ecotone than we actually do in the dry rainforest. The white part that you see is called Eagle Nest. Now, Eagle Nest is one of the best remnants of the camps, the depression camps in the 1930s. It still has the stone foundations for the huts there. There are about 24, 25 huts. And you'll notice that there's one trail going right through the Eagle Nest area. The purple sign track is showing you an alternative route, which we suggested to council as a better way to go. The Lockyer Valley Regional Council wanted the tracks to come out at Withcott to revitalise that centre because of the new bypass to Toowoomba took the traffic away from it. This was a way to get the tracks down there without going through Redwood. Okay, and one of the reasons why that was council had just acquired a couple of properties that enabled that to happen.
If they wanted to.
Yeah. Look, there's also a few things like we've got Indigenous artefacts. If you see my picture there, I've got a handprint that was discovered about 3 or 4 years ago in Redwood Park when we were, during the drought, when we were trying to find places to work. So there are other artefacts there. We've had those verified by people in Brisbane. We've got a number of endangered animals there. Let's say threatened animals. We've got the endangered ecosystem, which is the redwood, the dry rainforest. We've also got powerful owls, black-breasted button quail, greater gliders, a number of birds that fly through the area, migrants, koalas, of course. You can't miss them. They're now endangered. And although they don't live in the rainforest, they actually occupy the surrounding eucalypt forest. There's also a threatened orchid, Sarcocollis weinfellii, which is one of the remnants that people don't want to know about, mainly because in the 70s, the native orchids were trashed by orchid collectors in Redwood. As far as what's special about this area, we've been working there for what, 15 years, and prior to that it was a special place for me right from when I was a child. We went down there. When I retired and the current Friends of the Escarpment Parks group wanted to disband, we looked for a new place to go, and that was Redwood. And of course, it revitalised the group, and we've been working there ever since. I don't know if I've got anything more to add about that special area.
I think that's great. One quick question from the floor was, what was the land zoned as, Hugh?
By council, they call it a recreation park. And one of our goals is to get the conservation status of that upgraded, preferably to a national park, which we're trying to negotiate with councillor, state member Megan Scanlon. We'd like to get that. If we can't get a national park, then we've got conservation parks, and failing that, we've got some other reserves that we could use.
Thanks, Hugh. Did you want to mention anything else about the goals, or the goals for the group, or should I move to Sandy?
I can do something on that. Okay.
That was simple. Stop the mountain bikes in Redwood Park, and a secondary goal was to make it a national park. Very clear. But Hugh, you might have something to add. I don't know.
Yeah.
We did talk about this afternoon.
Yes.
You and I.
We've look, just as a matter of interest, we have lots of groups, especially since we mounted our campaign. of groups coming down to the park. We include bird watchers, plants people, bushwalkers. We even have a bush kindy that comes down there. They were down there yesterday. We've got people that come down like ourselves, want to improve especially the dry rainforest and make it an area that people want to go and visit. In fact, we'd like to think that was part of our legacy, that we leave that in a state that future generations can come and enjoy.
And in terms of the solutions that were posed, I think you said before that what you felt was a politically possible solution was this alternate route. So you had a clear alternative proposal rather than just stop the mountain bike trails. I think is a good lesson to draw.
Yes, and we looked at different ways of getting around it, and the preferred way was not to come into Redwood at all for the downhill mountain bike tracks. So the alternative, I think, is quite feasible, and that's the way we are going at the moment.
Thank you. Sandy, did you want to talk a little bit about the power analysis?
Yes, I will. I don't know what a power analysis is, but I gave it a go. So look, first off, I think everybody has to realise that federal and state governments have been groomed by the mountain bike industry that mountain biking is good for the economy and good for life and health. And I'm just going to quote from the Ernst & Young report from 2020, which was given to the federal government. And the report was called We Ride 2020. And Ernst & Young said this, to qualify in their report, they said, this report has been prepared for the benefit of the client and is considered only the interests of the client. EY, which is Ernst & Young, has not been engaged to act and has not acted as an advisor to any other party. Accordingly, EY makes no representations as to the appropriateness, accuracy, completeness of this report for any other party's purpose. So that indicated to me that it's shonky, you know, they weren't going to, even the people that wrote it weren't too sure of the facts, and they wrote it over a 4-month period for the mountain bike industry. That report was given in federal parliament and accepted by such luminaries of our political system as Josh Frydenberg, who was the treasurer, Jim Chalmers, member for Wentworth, Steve Jones, the assistant shadow treasurer in the Labor government at the time, and Helen Haynes, the independent. They all accepted and sang the praises of the report and commented how useful this report was going to be in developing policy. So there's no, that's what I'm saying. From the top, it's down is rotten because there's no balance. And to me, it seems like the mountain bike industry is actually writing the policy for the federal government and the state governments.
Who actually made the decision though, Sandy?
Decision to what?
Who could make the decision about stopping or changing the path? It was the council, right?
The council in the end could, but they were given incentives by the state government, financial incentives to do the development, and were encouraged by the state government, who are basically being lobbied all the time by the mountain bike industry, whose main game is to sell mountain bikes and to see growth in that area. And public parks represent free access and free parks for mountain bikers. So that helps the growth of the sport. And there's no, in these reports, there's nothing negative said about what the environmental damage these bike paths do, especially on steep country. I did mountain biking when I was younger. I gave it up because it was too dangerous. I ride a bike all the time, and I've got no qualms about riding on a bike path or a path which is not too steep, but I will not ride on steep mountain bike paths personally.
So Could you talk a little bit about, Sandy or Hugh, about the strategies? Like, what did you decide was the path you were going to take, no pun intended, to stop that particular path and find a new one?
Okay, so we decided that we needed the local government are fairly illiterate about, and councillors are fairly ecologically illiterate. So we felt that after they read a report from Dirt Art that this was going to bring in $21 million a year to the region, which Q and I calculated was $57,000 a day, $400,000 a week to the region. And we thought that was poppycock. So these reports are shonky and they need to be examined. So we started doing the examination of that and deconstructing it. That was one thing that we did. We also realised that councils are generally filled with business people who understand money. And when these reports are presented, they're generally monetised. And so I think our task was actually to educate the councillors and the general public as to the value of Redwood Park biologically and from the point of view of preserving habitat. So that was our task, was educating. I felt from the moment the environmental impact assessment was announced, our primary goal was to educate the council and the public as to the true value of Redwood Park, not its monetary value. And they're two different things. Do you want me
How'd you go about doing that, Sandy? What were some of the steps that the group took? How did it build?
I thought that was in another section. But anyway.
I'll elaborate there. We first met in the Clyde Berghofer Centre, and we got all the guff from the council and from Dirt Art, and they spoke to us extensively on what they were going to do. We furthermore met with Dirt Art in Redwood to explain our concerns about some of the tracks, and they agreed to make some changes which we weren't aware of. And subsequently to that, my wife and I walked the proposed tracks and quickly realised that where they were proposing to put the tracks was totally inappropriate. We organised a meeting down in Redwood Park, which we had quite a number of people. That was run by Paul King. We had a petition that was organised there, and out of that we formed a steering committee to get the to start taking actions as to what we should do. And as a result of that, we had regular meetings, monthly meetings over 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
And when COVID came, well, instead of having personal meetings, we had Zoom meetings, and they were always regularly supported. We also encouraged our followers, and we had quite a number of followers, to write letters to the council, to the newspapers, and to the community newspapers, and which they did, and which we stored on a website so people could have a look what was written and what the responses from council were. I think they sort of I've covered a few things there, like tactics and stuff as well. I might leave it there. Sandy, you organised the money.
Oh, yeah, I guess we came under DDEC because it gave us, the group, public liability insurance, and the money came into the Dancing Bear because nobody really wanted to manage the money, and we were all set up managing small amounts of money. So we were quite happy to do that. DDEC wasn't equipped to do that. It had its own issues. So we had a separate organisation managing the money. Paul King was also on the signatory to the bank account, as was I. And we had another fellow called John Gallagher, who was a ex-ATO employee who was our treasurer. So that worked quite well. We managed to fundraise $5,000, I think, around about that. And that seemed to be more than enough to run the campaign. which was surprising. I think we've still got $2,500 left in the account. And I think the reason our campaign looks so professional, we had a lot of pro bono help from people. For instance, I started out writing a pamphlet, and then I got an art teacher to help me. And then Glenn Crimmins, who is a businessman, got his graphics designer to look at that. And he made it into this really nice, or she did, made it into a really nice glossy magazine, which all looked very professional. And as you saw, the video was professional. And we had 2 petitions going as well. We had an e-petition, parliamentary e-petition which would go to Megan Scanlon to asking her to stop the mountain bikes. And we also had a local petition, which is a hard copy petition, which people signed, which we had outside DDEC, and we took to the markets. And that petition enabled us to gather over 700 email addresses and phone numbers. And it also allowed us to engage in conversations with people, which an e-petition doesn't do. So that was good. That was some of the things that helped.
Awesome. Thank you. And can someone mention the council election and the EPBC, Environmental Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act, the tactic around that and around the delaying the development?
Well, that wasn't really unveiled till right at the end, I think. Scott McPhee was doing a presentation, gave a presentation, 30-minute presentation to council on the eve of the decision of what would happen to Redwood Park. And he popped it in there. He said, you know, that even if you pass this, we will be taking, we're referring it to the federal government using the EPBC, and it'll be at least another further 2 years before this will go through. And by that time, there'll be a council election, and we'll be campaigning at that election. And at one point, Councillor Tim McMahon turned to Scott, and he said, is there any room for compromise about this, Scott? And Scott said no. So he knew that the fight was not going to end the next day. Even if they approved the report, we would be taking it all the way. And that also was for the anthropological site too, which we hadn't been fully explored. So that would also be another impediment to them continuing with this development.
Thanks, Sandy and Hugh. I think there's a lot more to the story to tell, but to allow people to ask questions, Deb, could I just ask you to mention just in a couple of minutes, 1 or 2 of the challenges that were faced?
Yes, certainly. So the first challenge is that we were always fighting a rearguard action because Dirt Art's report had already been adopted by council before anyone was really aware of the content, because it was seen to be a financial bonanza. Toowoomba is a regional town and traditionally supports the agricultural sector. It's a very conservative town with a large retiree population that's largely happy with the way things are. Toowoomba's main tourist draw card is the Carnival of Flowers, showcasing manicured urban parks and exotic Northern Hemisphere annual flowers. TRC, that's an abbreviation for Toowoomba Regional Council, not viewed as a council that supports the environment, fixated on economic development. And only this year has the TRC embraced the Land for Wildlife programme and was really one of the only South East Queensland councils not to have done so. So a real challenge for us was educating residents and councillors. They just didn't know what was in the park, about the park, the value in having an endangered dry rainforest ecosystem within 10 minutes of the city centre that's home to several endangered species. And personally, being a recent arrival in Toowoomba, I was surprised at how many residents didn't know of its existence. Networking with known environmentally aware groups and building on these connections, finding a coordinating organisation, in this case it was DDEC, with experience in mounting environmental campaigns, and this I believe was very important. There was the challenge of deciding on how to raise awareness, how to raise campaign funds. We used chuffed.org. identifying existing knowledge and strengths within the steering committee and the importance of evidence-based research, issues and legislation. And you must always be able to support whatever you say with evidence. And keeping the issue alive during the long wait for the environmental impact assessment to be handed down to TRC. That's the document that would influence councillors' decision-making. So there was a campaign of letters to the paper, social media, interviews with TV reporters, all to keep it in the front of people's minds. And an ongoing challenge is exploring ways to safeguard Redwood Park into the future, possibility of national park status. And I just have a personal comment. It is a challenge in a long campaign to remain focused. Also, resisting the negativity from the opposition and not reacting to adverse comments, especially in social media. You don't want to engage with people who are trying to rubbish you, and always remaining respectful. And that's how I would say that it was even a comment made by the councillors who congratulated us on our campaign, and in particular from the very respectful way in which the whole campaign was conducted.
Thank you so much, Deb, and Hugh and Sandy. I'm going to pause there. I think we perhaps need to go to questions from the floor, because there's a bunch of questions that have been put in the chat. So let's just go to questions. If you just want to take yourself off mute and dive in.
Jenny? Jen?
Yes.
Oh, no, that's,
that's
my Jenny, sorry.
You're not on mute, Sandy.
Jenny, can you get the say?
So one of the questions in the chat was, were they council-owned recreation parks? Were there unauthorised trails in Redwood Park? That was a couple of questions.
I can answer that. The Redwood Park is actually state government-owned land managed by Toowoomba Regional Council. There were a number of unauthorised trails built in Redwood Park, which we were quickly informed about and which we put a stop to. Does that answer both those questions?
I think so. Yep. Unless someone wants to dive in. Petitions and cake. Were there any particular questions about the petitions and cake? I think that was Charles's group.
To do with it.
Sorry, Sandy, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Good.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we did was we had a cake stall down at the local market. It was a koala stall, and every slice of cake bought 2 koala seedlings, which we planted down the bottom of the range on some land that the Lockyer Valley Council had given us on the edge of Gatton Creek, which actually runs through Redwood. So that was the cake thing, and that stall came a bit of a gathering point for us once a month. So all the conservationists, bushwalkers, field nats would come down and have a chat down there and a cup of tea. So, and also FEP used it twice. And yeah, and we also used FEP twice as featured. We shared the tent with them with the petition. So it was that was a good thing. I think some of the things that perhaps haven't been mentioned is this book that was produced by Charles Dove. It's a, what would you call it? Coffee table book. It's a coffee table book. And that book, we paid $674 for, and we sent 10 copies to all the councillors, the Toowoomba City councillors, except the mayor. So, because he'd been the main cheer squad leader for the mountain bikes, and there was no thing changing him. But we sent that copy through, and we asked the councillors to have a look at it and then send it on to a local library or school. So that was
it's just magnificent.
yeah, and it's a beautiful book, and that came. There's some photos. There's
Small birds,
all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so that was a nice part of it. What was the other bit of your question? The cakes. That's the cake bit, I think.
I think that was it. The petition's connected to the cakes.
The petition was connected to the cakes. We always had the petition there, and we always were signing people up.
I'm talking about.
But that was only once a month. And did we do it through COVID?
But we also had it at the stall at the arcade every day.
Yeah, and we also had it at the arcade at our shop downtown, Darling Downs Environment Council shop, which is in Australia Arcade, which is in the CBD. And we had that out in the arcade, and we get 5 or 6 signatures a day, wouldn't we? At least.
And inquiries. And we get
inquiries.
We also did postcards, Sandy.
Oh, the postcards. I've actually got some postcards here.
While you find the postcards, Sandy, Ingrid, did you want to say anything about your comment in the chat? The Feel Blue touchscreen?
Me?
Ingrid.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I was just wondering whether you tried to recruit council in any other ideas that might tread more lightly on the space, and the other groups you mentioned that are already engaged in the space and utilising the space, to see whether there's inherent value in actually keeping the environmental value of the space intact for the council. Because if the council already got a monetarised mindset, can you encourage them to think of the space in another way, is what my thoughts were. And also there was 2 questions, and the other thing was, what have you done to try and shift the space from a council owned space to shift it into a national park space? Because I don't know how to do that, and I was wondering if anyone knows how you would actually do that.
Let's see, the last one I can remember. That's a challenge that we're currently visiting. After we had our win, I felt rather exhausted with quite a bit of work, and we're only sort of getting back into that now. We've had a response from Megan Scanlon, but we've got to take that up with her. We definitely want the status of the Redwood Park change. We don't want it to be called a recreation park. To me, that's an anything goes park. And it's definitely not that. It's recognised as a wonderful park and something that has to be preserved for posterity. When this all started, I took all the councillors for a drive through Redwood. I had permission to drive in the park, and it's what, 250 hectares. And I was amazed at the little knowledge that they had about the park. And that's one thing that we have to attend to, and that is to improve or rewrite something about all our escarpment parks, not just Redwood, so that people will get an idea of how valuable they are.
So Hugh,
yeah.
Sorry. So if you're going to shift something from recreation to conservation, does anyone understand how to do that? Because I think that's what you're trying to say, isn't it? To move it from a recreational zone that the council sees to a conservational zone that you see and we see. So if anyone knows how to do that, that's what, yeah.
At the moment, the little bit of inquiries I've made so far about that is that it's a state government issue, because they have given the park over to the local council to manage. I do think that one of the ways of doing that would be to get council to come up with a new definition for our escarpment parks. We're in the process of doing that at the moment, mainly to sort of restore some of the protections that were afforded the parks prior to amalgamation. Once the council amalgamated, Dogs were allowed to go into the parks. They were supposed to be on a leash, but all the signs regarding that were taken down. And I'm still negotiating with our council, and that's being discussed in the next council meetings with regard to restoring those protections. I would like to think that we could get to be a national park. If not a national park, a conservation park, and there's 2 levels of conservation parks. But that would mean that state government may have to take control of the park again, and it comes under the control of national parks. So that's where I'm at this stage, but it's very early days. I do know that that the state government has become more flexible about putting certain areas under protection with regard to who owns it. So it doesn't have to be owned by the state government. The one great thing about getting it either a national park or conservation park or nature refuge is that that is written into the deed of the land and has to be changed by the state government.
I think the other question that Ingrid asked, if I'm right, went to whether the group considered the opportunity of, you talked about a lot of groups that you connected with, whether the group considered the opportunity of identifying the interests of some of those other groups to work out some alternative usages for the park that you could collectively advocate and campaign for. Was that something that was in the thinking? Because I know you did alliance building.
Not really.
No, not really.
Because I think what you talked about was a whole lot of people that could be your allies in looking at how they value it, because I think there's a difference between how you value something and use of something. And to use it is, in my mind, and what I understand, is to take from, but to value is to actually tread lightly and appreciate for its fundamental values. And I think the word recreation is a use, whereas conservation is a value. And so I think you listed a whole lot of people that actually look at how to value rather than use. So I think they could be allies, and I think you could negotiate with council. And I've been doing a little bit of deep diving for my own personal interests in Feel Blue, Touch Green. And it's about mental health for people who are struggling, for hospitals, aged care, and different other people, in places where you can actually commune with nature and the benefits to the happiness index of communities. And if what you've identified from what I could hear is you've got an aging community of retirees that could probably value from having a space of tranquility and peace to actually enjoy a place for its value, not for how you can use it for recreation.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you, Jenny.
In the 15 years that I've been actively involved down there, we have made, well, I haven't been, we've negotiated with all sorts of groups. We have open days that we've held down there, spotlighting tours that we've held, and they've been open to the general public. But we have worked with the bushwalkers, 2 different groups of bushwalkers. Obviously the field nats, they come down there to do, and sometimes we're with them when they do their work. I don't think you came on the last one, Deb. That was with Bill McDonald. So it hasn't been, we haven't actually gone in and said, we'll get you how, we have never done that survey. Is that okay? Does that satisfy that question, Ingrid?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was, looking at who you can get as allies and how you can change the fundamental use is what I was sort of,
We have never really looked at changing the fundamental uses.
Can I jump in about something I think's probably quite significant that we've missed in the course of the conversation? So there's two parks, there's Jubilee and Redwood Park. Jubilee has 28 mountain bike tracks running through it. Redwood has none. And during the two flood deluges we had on the range this year, 21 of the mountain bike tracks had to be closed. So only 7 are going. Redwood, there was no tracks closed. It just gives you an idea of the risk that you take by putting mountain bike tracks into steep country and the cost that it's going to cost our council to repair those tracks. So when they put have these idealised reports which say how great the mountain bike tracks are going to be and what all the cost benefits to the community in health and wealth, they don't take that into account. They have to be maintained, and it's a costly exercise getting machinery into these very steep wilderness areas to repair tracks. I just want to say that before we're going, because basically mountain bike tracks turn soaking rain into running rain, and that's the problem.
I think the other part of the question for my mind is perhaps you didn't look into what the kind of collective kind of usage space was. Like I see, the suggestion of ours camps, etc. I think there's a whole lot of imagination that could be put into that. But you did build alliances with groups, and you built quite a strong group of alliances. And I just wondered whether there were any reflections on what allowed that to happen.
Okay, well, I suppose we did a lot of things. It wasn't with the mountain bike things in mind, though. It was just because we wanted to make the best use of the park for the people that came there. For instance, one of the things we did, we ran a basket making workshop down there using cat's claw creeper. If any of you know about cat's claw creeper. So they had to get their own cat's claw creeper, and they made baskets. And there were some exciting things that were made there. We often, well, how could I say it? We actually work with quite a number of groups. Like we work with the Toowoomba Bushwalkers, we work with Toowoomba Field Naturalists, we work with the plant people, Queensland native plants. They come down. We've just had a workshop with the Lockyer Valley Uplands group, plus people from the Upper Condamine area on how to get rid of Madeira vine. We feel we're not too bad with that. But they were workshops. But apart from that, no, we haven't done anything constructive with regard to getting people to come up with ideas on how to further the experience of the park.
But just before we do, can I make sure, I'm not sure whether Charles, your Mount Cootha Protection Group was trying to jump in with a question before I go to Sandy, or anyone from that group.
I'll just ask, is there any questions from this end?
I'd like to know how long the campaign went for.
Yeah, just question how long the campaign ran for.
About 3 years.
Is that
3 years.
3?
3 years.
2.5.
2.5.
It really ramped up in the 2 years, I think. When the environmental impact statement went ahead, then really ramped up, and that's when all the connections started to happen. And everyone's passionate about saving Redwood, and I think Hugh and Kay's work down there. I mean, FEP, Friends of the Escarpment Parks, there's actually 11 escarpment parks, and there's up to 80 volunteers working in those parks at any one time. So that's just a huge network in itself, and they're all connected with other other groups such as bushwalkers and bird observers, etc. So yeah, when the council poked FEP, they just thought they were poking Hugh and Kay, but no, they weren't. They were poking 80 people. And
to clarify on the permission process, you mentioned an environmental impact statement. Was that something that simply the council required, or was this actually going through a formal planning process?
Can I say something there?
Yep.
It was council who engaged it, because whilst they had adopted this dirt art report, it was always subject to an environmental impact statement. So it was the council that paid for that.
it's the ratepayers who paid for it.
Sandy
Does that answer the question? Was that the answer to the question you're looking for?
Yes, thank you.
Can I add something there with regard to the fauna and flora report that Redleaf produced? We had, I think council were very sympathetic. In the end, they were very sympathetic to what we were doing, and that was brought about by all the correspondence, and especially with regard to McPhee. What's his first name?
Scott McPhee.
Scott McPhee did a marvellous presentation in the delegation to council, which actually turned some people's minds towards stopping it. But the real crux came in the flora and fauna report by Redleaf. It gave, because it said no to mountain bikes, that gave the councillors the authority to say no without well, they would have upset the mountain bikers, no doubt, but it gave them leverage. Instead of the mountain bike saying, oh, you only listen to all those people, it was actually the flora and fauna report that was produced by Redleaf, and that's my opinion though.
So in closing, what I'm going to ask is, in 30 seconds or less, so reports like, you know, that we need that evidence, we need the experts in the room, but often those reports, as we've all experienced, fall on absolutely deaf ears. So in 30 seconds or less, what is it that you think was the key thing that tipped this and got it over the line? So I'll start with you, Sandy, 30 seconds.
I don't think it was anything. It was our resolve and the way the campaign was run on a very positive lines. We never attacked the mountain bikers. We just pointed out the problems with mountain bike tracks going through a very small but fragile environment. And we kept on that. And we did things like these postcards. I've got to show those. There's our bird cards.
Yeah.
We'd sent 5,000 of those out with the information on the back about it.
So can I summarise to say there were lots and lots of actions that individuals across the community took, because there was a lot of hard work that was put in.
Yeah, we had bumper stickers.
Yeah,
it was
awesome.
We were, that just buoyed things along, and it was just I think everyone felt good about being part of the campaign. Yeah,
awesome. Hugh, I'm going to give you less than 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll go back and say again, I think it was the Redleaf's flora and fauna report which gave the council the way out and saving face.
Thank you, Hugh. And Deb?
I think a lot of it was our research, our thorough research, that disproved a lot of the things that Dirt Art Report had claimed, and we were able to say that that was not the case. And I think that would have also helped enormously the councillors make up their mind.
Awesome. There's three different, I think, angles, like three different pieces of what won the campaign: the people power, the research, and the internal reports. I'm going to ask you to put your email in the chat before you go. If you want us to send you some more information, the group's offered to send a bit of a report along. That would be awesome. We won't close it until you've done that. I want to thank the Save Redwood Park team for being the experimental bunnies and sharing this story with us in a generous way and spending the time to prepare and do that well. I think that We need to learn from each other, and we can only get stronger together. Thank you all for joining us for this evening and for your participation, enthusiasm. But it's 7 o'clock and I like to end meetings on time. So I'm going to say thank you again and say good night if everyone wants to give a wave as we leave.
And thank you, Jen,
because I'd really love you to, thank you. I'd love you to put your email in the chat, so we won't shut it until you do that.